Okay, today we're going to start our next unit on conics, and the first one that we are going to work with is the circle. And the circle happens when you take a conic shape here and you slice through it. If you were to look straight down, what you would see is a circle. The standard form of a circle is right here, this x minus h squared, y minus k squared is equal to the radius squared. That's what that r is. The minus h, or the minus k here, is showing movement of the circle off of the origin, and hk will be the new center of the circle. Notice they have the minuses here. That means it's moving in the opposite direction of what you would normally think. So if you saw something like x minus 2, that's actually moving 2 units to the right, not to the left. Let's take a look at what we've got. We want to write the equation in standard form of the circle described by the graph. Number one is just giving us some information. I can see that the center is at 2, negative 7, so it's going to be x minus 2 squared plus y plus 7 squared. Because remember, if I put in y minus negative 7, we would get that plus right there. And that's going to equal the radius squared, and 2.5 squared would be 6.25. Looking at this piece here, you can see the circle is cut in half. That is the diameter. That would make the center of the circle point be 2, 0. It says note that the circle is tangent to the y-axis. That means it's just one point touching the y-axis over here. It's difficult for us to draw that, so we're just stating there's just one small point there. Writing this equation is going to be x minus the x value of the center, minus 2 squared, plus y plus 0 squared, which you don't really need anything there. And that would equal the radius squared. The radius here is 2, so that would be 4. Let's just clean this guy up a little bit. And that would be the equation of the circle, so shown here. What we're looking at here, I need this piece here. So I have the center piece. That's pretty easy to write. So it's going to be x minus 3 squared plus y minus 7 squared is equal to the radius squared. What I don't know is the radius. So the radius is sitting here. You can do it two ways. You could use the distance formula back from the geometry class between these 2 points, which would get you 3 minus 5 squared plus 7 minus 1 squared. And when you figured all that, you would get to the square root of 40. But remember, this would be r squared. So the equation would then be x minus 3 squared plus y minus 7 squared is equal to 40, because when you square a square root, you get 40. I think, however, an easier method to do is we have this xy pair. So let's put it in where the x and the y is, and then we can solve for that r squared. So what we would have here is 5 minus 3 squared plus 1 minus 7 squared would equal r squared. Here we'd get 2 squared, which is 4. 6 squared here would be 36 would equal r squared. And then we can plainly see that the r squared is equal to 40. Either method works. It's really just what's more comfortable for you. Okay, so all these conics have general forms, and kind of looking this way for the circle. X squared plus y squared plus ax plus by plus c. A is the center, B is radius, C general equation of the circle. So we want to find all these things given these certain endpoints of the circle here. So the endpoints of the diameter they're giving us are the points 1, 2. So let's go ahead and figure out the midpoint of that. So the midpoint would definitely be the center. So all that geometry is coming back. We're going to add the x's together and divide by 2, which would get us a 4 there. Then we're going to go ahead and add the y's together and divide by 2. So that would get us a center point of x minus 4 squared plus y plus 2 squared would equal the radius squared. So at this point here, we just need to figure out and use one of these points to go ahead and get what that radius is. I'm going to use the point 1, 2. I just think it's a little bit easier to work with. So I'm going to say, all right, so 1 minus 4 squared plus 2 plus 2 squared should equal the radius squared. It's going to get me negative 3 squared, which is 9, plus 4 squared, which is 16. So the radius squared would be 25. Now I know the radius to be 5. So at this point, I do have my full equation here. So we're going to say it is, I'm going to work over here. So we have x minus 4 squared plus y plus 2 squared. It's going to equal the radius squared, which is this piece right here, 25. This is the standard form. To get it into the general form, what we're going to need to do is start to multiply everything out. Now remember, when you're squaring a binomial here, you do need to FOIL it out. So we're going to wind up with x squared minus 8x plus 16 plus y squared plus 4x plus 4 is going to equal 25. Now we're going to just start to combine up all like terms here, and we wind up with, let's see, x squared plus y squared. So we're here. Next is the x term that we're going to follow. So we're going to combine up the two x terms here. We're going to wind up with, let's see here, that would be, no, it's just the one x, that's a y. It's just the one y x term minus 8x. We're going to list out the one y term that we have plus 4y, and then combining up all of the constants and setting it equal to 0 will get us the standard form of that equation. All right, let's flip our papers over. Great. All right, so what we're looking at here, again, we're looking at the equation. We want to know what is the center, what is the radius, and what are the intercepts of the graph. Looking at this guy here, all of these are divisible by 3, so let's go ahead and get that first. Let's kind of just transform this equation some. And 27 divided by 3 is 9. From this, I can pull the center. The center is going to be negative 1. Remember, it's the opposite of what we're looking at, 5. So negative 1, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 would be right there, graphing it as well. This number here is the radius squared, so the radius would be 3. Now when we're going to graph this thing, you want to count up 3, to the right 3, down 3, then to the left 3, and try to make your circle look like a circle as best that you can. It's then asking us, okay, well, what are the x-intercepts? I can clearly see it's not crossing the x-axis here, so that is a non-applicable situation. And then it wants to know what the y-intercepts are. When we go to look at y-intercepts, I can't tell exactly where that's falling, and we do need exact answers. So anytime you're looking at a y-intercept, the x is 0. So we're going to go ahead and put 0 in for x right here and then solve for y. So if I put 0 here, alright, so what I get here is 1 squared, which is 1, plus y minus 5 squared is equal to 9. Let's go ahead and subtract that 1 over. To get rid of the square, we would take the square root, so that's going to leave us just a y minus 5. If I take the square root here, I'm going to get plus minus. Remember, we always get the plus minus. 2 square roots of 2. We do need the radical simplified. And the last thing we do is add that 5 over. So the y-intercepts, there would be 2 of them. And we want to leave it in this radical, plus minus, radical form, because it is giving us exact answers at that point. For graphing purposes, if you just kind of want to know, you could look at the decimals. It would be 7.832.17. But we're looking for answers as simplified radicals. Okay, so the next thing we're looking at is if I give you the general form, I want you to write me and graph in standard form. So I need it in standard form in order to make this graph. So we're going to do this by completing the squares. So the first thing we're going to do is gather up the x terms. And then we're going to gather up the y terms here and here. I'm going to bring that 3 over to the other side. Now when completing the square, you need to take half this b value, which is 4, and square it, which would be 16. And the reason we do that is that creates a perfect square trinomial, so this will factor into x plus 4 squared. But remember, this is an equation, and what we add to the left side, we added 16. We're going to have to maintain that balance by adding 16 to the right. So be real conscious of that. That's where most students make their mistakes. We're going to do the same thing for this y value. So half of 12 is 6. 6 squared would be 36. Since I added 36 to the left side, I have to add 36 to the right. I'm going to bring this down into factored form. Gathering up all these numbers over here, we get a total of 49. Now I can see my center. That's my center. And I can see my radius will be center. So we're going to go to negative 4, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember, we count up the radius, down, left, and right. So we're going to count 7 each time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And again, try to make it look like an actual circle. Okay, we've got one more problem to work with here. Kind of the same thing that we just did. We're sitting here in general form, and we want to change it over to standard form. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and gather up the x's together. So I'm going to have, sorry about that, 2x squared minus 8x plus 2y squared plus 18y. And again, I'm going to bring that 43 over to the other side. Now to complete the square, we have to have a 1 lead, and we don't have that right now. So first thing, and I'm going to need it here as well, what I'm going to do is first factor out the 2. So that's going to leave me with x squared, not a plus, I need a, sorry about that, a minus. Leave a little space to complete the square, factor out the 2 here. Leave a little space. Now we need to be careful here. We're going to complete the square. So we're going to take half of 4, which is 2. 2 squared is 4. So I'm going to add 4 to the left. But I'm not really adding 4. I'm adding 4 times 2. So that is really a total of 8, which is what I need to add over to the right side. Let's try this for the y's. Half of 9 is 3. 3 squared is, oh my gosh, sorry about that. Half of 9 is 4.5. 4.5 squared is 20.25. But again, I'm not just adding 20.25, I'm adding that times 2, so I'm going to add the 40.5 over to the right side. At this point, I can start to complete the square by factoring here. So I'm going to wind up with x minus 2 squared plus 2y, what do we have here? Y plus 4.5 squared. And adding these guys all up over here, we get 4.5. And let's get rid of those 2's. That's going to be a total of 2.25. All right, so that is it there. If you have any questions, please ask your teacher, and we'll pick up with the next lesson.